We all have a fire that burns deep inside of us. It's just a matter of whether or not we allow the fear of failure, the fear of looking bad, to stop us from ever getting started on the path that we truly want to go down. In this episode, we talked to Logan Hanks, who, fortunately for him, realized he was in a job that he did not like. He was willing to take a pay cut, went back to his roots as a farmer, and now has found the freedom to start a podcast, to pursue his passion of hunting, and so many other things. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I am your host, Scott Volkortson. This week's guest is my good friend, Logan Hanks. Logan is a hunter, a farmer, and a host of two separate podcasts. He and I share a very similar mindset on life and have had some great conversations offline. So I thought it'd be fun to bring him on and find out more about what drives him and a little bit about his background. How you doing, Logan?
Man, Scott, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on, man. It's always an honor to chat with you. I feel like, me and you have talked about our phone calls almost every time. I feel like could turn into a podcast. I love what you're doing over here. I'm glad you got your show going. I think you're doing an awesome thing, and I'm honored to be on the show.
Well, thank you, and thanks for making the time. I know we had to get it scheduled before you get into your busy season coming up here, where then it's probably would have been dictated by when it's raining or not raining.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff I want to get into, but just a little bit. I know in our conversations, you originally got started in like the tool and die world and then made that decision at some point that you were going to go back to farming, which is what your family had done.
Yep.
So just walk me through a little bit of how you made that decision and how you knew it was the right time to do it.
Oh, man. I grew up farming, and as a kid that's kind of, really didn't have a choice. I was told, like, all right, you're born into farming. We need help. So you are the help. And so I was in that. And, for my young years growing up, I had a lot of, I don't want to say animosity, but all my buddies were doing a lot of fun stuff, and I was working all the time, and especially during the summers. And so I was like, when I turn 18, when I get out, the last thing I'm ever going to be is a farmer. I used to tell all my buddies, if you went back and asked my high school buddies, what's Logan going to be when he gets older? They would have said, I don't know, but the last thing he'll ever be is a farmer. And so I got a chance to get out. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the flip side of that, I remember growing up, because I grew up in a farming community, and the kids would get out of school to go help with harvest or whatever on the farm. And we were always so jealous that they were getting out of school, and they would always be like, trust me, I'd rather be in school.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Because we used to do a lot of hay as well. And so we would throw, you'd be bucking square bales and stuff. And it was brutal there, because we used to do, several thousand square bales at a time. And so it would be, nothing to be loading 1,500 square bales into a van trailer. And when you get into the back of a van trailer in June, July, that time frame, it's probably about 120 degrees. And the air is thick with dust. We might occasionally throw a mask on. Typically, you're just freaking, inhaling that dust. So great air quality. But I just knew, man, I really had to spread my wings. I am a guy that when somebody tells me, man, you need to go this way, I'm probably going the other way. I don't know why that is, but I've never enjoyed being told what to do, sometimes to probably to a bad degree. Not saying that, like, if I have a job, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do it well, as hard as I can. But I still I like to kind of forge my own path. And so I needed to spread my wings. So I went to tech school. I actually was going for maintenance. Well, they were full. So my elective was machine and tool. I didn't even know what that was. I always joked when I was a machinist, nobody knows what a machinist is until they're a machinist. And so I went to machine tool, and we had some just, raw stock, and I got to see it morph into this awesome part. It was like a threaded, knurled, like all these different grooves and notches done into this thing. And I'm like, man, this is pretty cool. And so I ended up just going full into machine tool, and from there got into the medical machining world. This was really large out here in our area. We've got Medtronic and Smith and Nephew and some of those places out here. So I got into that, and I love the machining aspect of creating something out of metal. I've always loved metal. Like, some guys really like woodworking. I much rather would prefer to work with metal. But I did that for a little while, and I missed being outside so bad. I was like seeing tractors when I'd be going to work or getting off work. Guys would be planting crops or combines running, and I was like, man, I need to be back in the field. And so I started really trying to figure out a way to get back, because my dad was growing his operation, and it wasn't quite to a size where they could afford to bring me back full time. Because at this point, $8 an hour was not going to make it. Like I needed to make a living. And so my wife, we got married, and she carried our insurance. That was a big deal. Like I no longer needed that insurance through work. And I found an opportunity. I bought my first farm. And so, you know what? I was just like, it's pretty much now or never. I was going to work, and I was fantasizing about quitting in a dramatic fashion every day. Like I'd listen to some song, like, and it'd pump me up, and I'd be like, this is the day I'm going to like throw my coffee in their face and walk out the door. Like I couldn't wait to get out. I was so, it had become a pretty bad, like, environment as far as, you get miserable every day. You go to work, and I feel like you probably know this at this point. I'm a pretty positive, happy guy most times. So if something's got me down in that spot, that just ain't for me. And so
and when that happens, that'll bleed into every other area of your life too.
It does, man. I mean, and I was trying to. I will say the good thing, like there is one strangely good thing to being in a miserable job, and it did push me to pursue a lot of other avenues. I will say I started writing a lot at that point. I was getting up early, and people used to kind of joke with me because, and I preface this by saying I don't consider myself a writer. People would probably read my stuff and think it was terrible. But I wrote like 2 or 3 full-length screenplays, and while I was a machinist, and then I also was, I was lifting weights and doing it, and people would be like, Logan, how do you come here and you work like a 10-hour shift or longer, and then you're like writing, one of the guys would be like, you're writing a damn book while you're lifting weights, and you like, when do you sleep? What do you do? And so I'm like, man, I steal from Arnold there. You sleep faster is kind of my mentality on that. And so I don't know, man, I just got to the point. It was actually April of 2015. I can remember I bought the farm, and I got a chance to go back, and my pay was cut in half, and my happiness was like doubled. For anything I lost in money going back to the farm, I like more than made up for with my joy. And I always say, like, it's nothing against being a machinist. Like, honestly, if I was making guns and doing stuff, I think I would have really liked it. Like my goal when I was a machinist was to start doing DOD contracts. That's what I wanted to do, get into that defense sector. But there just really wasn't a good outlet to do it. And I wasn't in a position to like start my own business as a 20-year-old dude trying to land DOD contracts. But it's a great job, but I need the outdoors, and the farming was definitely more in my blood than I actually realized it was. So, man, that's when I made the leap, got back into it, and it's been awesome ever since.
And do you think going through that and being, as you put it, miserable towards the end there, that it taught you valuable lessons? Like now when something gets hard in farming, or, because it seems like obviously in farming, so much is dictated by the weather, equipment breaking down. Do you feel like you have a better handle on things, or you have a better way to deal with those things, knowing that at least you're still doing what you're passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's farming. I had a guy one time ask me how to become a farmer because he said he needed a less stressful job. and and that was, I've remembered that forever because I stress 100 times more now than I ever did. When I was getting a steady paycheck, my worries and misery was because I just wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing. It was never a stress like, am I going to make any money? Like, I never had that. Now, obviously, there's tons of overhead, and typically you're like, trying to squeak out a profit. So the stress is terrible, but man, I say it all the time. I could never go back to a normal job. Like, with the stress, I have an insane amount of freedom. I mean, it's Monday at 10:20 right now, and I'm on here doing the podcast with you. If I was still a machinist, I'd be standing in front of a 4-axis lathe or whatever right now.
Well, and I know that in speaking to you, sometimes I've given you a call and you're out walking around, in the field, hunting, doing exactly what you love, during your downtime, which, once again, that same freedom doesn't exist when you're a machinist. So
no, it doesn't, man. I mean, that is, and there is I have a strange attachment to the land. It's like very much to my core. If somebody said, man, you can have $1 million or you can have 100 acres of land, I would take the land any day of the week. I love the land. I mean, yesterday I went and shot on one of my farms, and when I have buddies that are like, yeah, I had to go sight my rifle in at the range the other day, or I wanted to go shooting, so we went and shot at the range. And they're like, what range do you shoot at? And I'm always like, well, I mean, I don't have like an official range, but I just go to one of the many farms that are isolated and shoot. Like, I shot 700 yards one day. Like, and that was I just picked out a good straight shot on the farm, and I had a good backdrop and everything. So, there's a very unique freedom to farming. I mean, we put in a lot of hours, but if you can do it in a way that you can really enjoy your life. I mean, and I'm one of those guys. There's a lot of farmers I know that they can become consumed entirely by just agriculture. And as much as I love farming and all that, I love the podcast side of things. I love meeting people and stuff like that. I don't ever want to be in such a lockdown that I can't also enjoy myself as well.
And that kind of goes into my next question is, so, you did the machinist thing, came back to farming. What was the impetus for starting the podcast, or where did that come from?
Oh, man.
For those that don't know, his podcast is Living Fully Loaded. And I know it's evolved since you first launched it, and you've had some amazing guests, but what was kind of the idea behind launching that?
Man, that's a good one to ask, because I don't even hardly know. Like, it just came out of nowhere. Like, honestly.
And part of the reason I ask is something I've never asked you, but that we always talk about is, I know you get really nervous and anxious, similar to the way I very much used to be and still am at times, like when you go travel or when you go to an event. So I'm like, I wonder he's like, hey, I'm just going to launch a podcast and talk to people.
Well, I really like people, if I see the little online T-shirts and it says like, I hate people, like that kind of stuff, I'm like, that is just not even that's like the opposite of my mindset. I truly like people, and I'm just fascinated by, I mean, even when I was a machinist, I guess it kind of started even when I was a machinist. As I would become people's friends, I would start to ask them, did you always want to be a machinist? Like that would kind of, after we became good buddies, And, a lot of times they'd be like, man, no, I did not want to be a machinist. This is not what I grew up thinking about and all this. And then as I'd become better friends with them, I'd kind of even peel the layers back a little more. And I'd be like, well, what did you really want to do? And, I'd have guys that'd be like, man, actually, I wanted to play baseball. I went to college for baseball. And then something happened and I got derailed. And so they just gave up on it. Another guy would be like, man, I wanted to start this business, but he just never did. And so it's almost like I've kind of been on this weird quest really to understand why so many people, they know really what they want to do, but they just don't do it. And that's plagued me forever. And that was one of the reasons why I was like, I've got to get out of the shop because this is not really what I want to do. And so then I get out of there and, you fast forward a few years and strangely enough, a hobby is what created the podcast for me. Through deer hunting, something that I never thought would any level of, I don't want to say any level of notoriety that I have kind of came from deer hunting, which is something that I never in my life expected. But I killed the crypt-orchid buck, and for some reason it kind of it opened a few doors with some people in the outdoor industry with me. And so at that point I was like, maybe I could do something with this. And that's when I started the podcast, and it was called American Huntsman. And I really just started it because I was like, well, I like talking to people. I like hunting. And y'all might can hear my chicken in the background. I don't know if y'all can hear that thing. He's being crazy. I got some chickens right out here. So if somebody's wondering what that is, it's a freaking chicken. But so I apologize for the farm sounds. But man, it just, I started it hunting, and, I kind of got bored with it. As much as I love hunting, I was like, I actually just like talking to people really about anything. If I started, Bert was actually one of the first ones I had on that we really diverted from hunting. We were having a good conversation. And instead of me keeping it on the path of hunting, I actually let it just, let's just go down this hole. And that's what I did. And I ended up enjoying it the most. And so that's when I was like, I think that I need to switch gears here. And that's what made me do it.
And I can relate to that, even with our podcast that we're doing, is we don't, for anybody that's listened, it's not 100% about business, about our business and firearms and that part of it. A lot of the connections we have made is through that, through the company side. But, I talk business and that part of it all day, every day. So sometimes it's nice just to find out or have real conversations with people and find out how they got to where they're at. And then what lessons can I learn from them, whether it be just relationship, business, life, whatever, kind of like we've talked about in the past, people that are doing cool things that, I feel like I can learn from and enhance my life, or anybody's life that can take lessons from it, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good way. I think I may have even told you this when we had talked one time, but when I switched to living fully loaded, in a lot of ways, it was kind of me selfishly scratching my own itch. Because it's like, all right, I remember Jack Carr was my first guest whenever I swapped to living fully loaded. And I was like, I'm about to talk to a New York Times best-selling author that's written some of my favorite books. I mean, and at the time, I think Savage Son, one of them had just come out. It wasn't The Terminal List. It was after The Terminal List.
Okay.
But it was just crazy to me when I really thought about the fact that, I'm about to have a conversation. Me and you have talked about it. I would always be like, man, I'm just a farmer. And our mutual buddy of ours, John Bartolo, just recently passed away. And whenever I walked into his studio, he said, I'm just a farmer. As soon as I walked in, that's how he greeted me. Man, I've always kind of felt like that. And so then it was crazy when it's like, man, I'm about to talk to this guy. And then, and even whenever I got to talk to you, I'm like, this dude is running freaking Valcourts and firearms. These are the Ferrari of the rim fires, man. And so it's super surreal to me. I mean, it's still super surreal to me. Like when I scroll through my phone and I see Scott Valcourtson, Jack Carr, Bert Soren, Brandon Lilly, like these different names in there, I'm like, this is what in the world? How did I get here? So in a lot of ways, it was a selfish scratching of my own itch, and looking back, I used to say I wanted to interact with very like powerful people. Like that was something, for some reason, I've always been like, man, it would be really cool to interact with powerful people. I never really knew if that would materialize or how that would materialize. And so it's really interesting to see that kind of trajectory that's led me to this place.
And so, like, as you've been interviewing and, you've had guests from all different backgrounds and everything, what are some of the takeaways that you've noticed? Because the one thing that I've noticed in talking to different people is, many times we put certain people like on a pedestal and, look up to them, and rightfully so. But then when you talk to them and have real conversations with them, you find out they deal with a lot of the exact same issues and concerns that everybody else does. They're not immune to that.
Yeah.
What are some of like the takeaways, or what have you learned from some of the different guests that you've had?
Well, you're spot on. One of the biggest things that, and something I try to kind of emphasize with my show is nobody is special at the end of the day. Like there's hard chargers is what I like to call a lot of them. Most all of them are very hard chargers. And, but they're not superheroes. They're not like some holy specimen of human being. They're a regular person that just had some desire that they've pursued with basically all of their passion. And that's something that I've taken away. It's just, and a lot of times, man, like you said, these people that are killing it, you peel back the layers and they're like anxiety ridden machines, like me and you were talking about, like I'm, and then you'll see them, but you see like the stuff on social media and you're like, man, these guys are crushing it and they never deal with this stuff. And then it's like, no, they are a normal human. They might be like very hardwired, like aggressively, but they're a normal human. They suffer the same things you do. They fight the same battles. And eventually, I think one of the big things with a lot of these guys is they have fought the battles enough at this point that they're very calloused to that, maybe the anxieties, and they get kind of calloused over, which makes them be able to just, keep their nose down and plow forward. And the biggest thing with that is, you only get to that point by continuously grinding forward. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen. Man, I'm trying to think of another one with them. They
along that same line, the one thing I've kind of noticed is as you start to peel back the layers, you'll find there many times isn't a big separator from like what we consider average people to people that are achieving at the highest levels. It's the very like minute details that they just seem to, that 1 or 2% that they've been able to overcome, or they max out, whatever you want to use for a term, that they slowly build on, and they have like that compound interest effect everybody talks about that gets them there.
Yeah.
Where I think far too often we're always looking for like that one big break, or, we're looking at that one big prize of if we do this, then this.
Yeah.
Where that's not usually how it works. It's all these little things that add up to those major victories.
Yeah, and it's there was, I guess, two things too, like with that. The first one, and it's obvious, people know it. It's just people don't really want to connect it with them a lot. And I guess these both go hand in hand, but it's perseverance. Most of the guys that have made it, they're doing something really awesome. They just hang on when others fall off, kind of thing. And it's also that slow and steady. A lot of them had a slow and steady growth. Everybody, like if you think about movies, everybody looks at Brad Pitt and they're like, man, this dude freaking came out of nowhere And, he was, you look at him, you're like, this dude's an overnight success in Hollywood. Now, he still did some pretty shitty roles, like in some other movies. And he also was dressed as a chicken at a fast food restaurant, getting paid like something he had some little weird thing. But anyways, like he still was in those crappy spots. And all these guys, they've started with really nothing. And it's like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I'm going to hang in there. As like you see with podcasting, people ask me all the time, man, how do you start a podcast? What do I need to do to start a podcast? I want to start a podcast. And I kind of ask them, I'll be like, well, why? Why do you want to start a podcast? And kind of go down that. And then I'm like, now what's your long game? Because podcasting is a long game. And I would say the same even with, ball courts and firearms. It did not start thinking, all right, in 2 years, we want to be the next Beretta, or we want to be the next Remington. You don't expect to blow up. Like, I didn't start my podcast and say in 2 years I want to be bigger than Rogan. So that's one of the things people. I'm not saying they don't have huge goals, but they're in it for the long haul.
And the one thing that I have found too is, like, especially with our company, is when you're kind of in the middle of it, it's hard to like take a step back and look at where you want to go. You're almost grinding daily. And then you look back, you're like, wow, we've come a long ways, in 10 years or 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I'll have people sometimes ask, like, did you ever see, or what was your goal? Like when you first got into it, when I started working with Dad, and I'm like, we were so busy. We didn't really have like these, and I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but we didn't have many of these long, we're like, okay, this is what we need to do today, this week, this month, and we would have, conversations about where we wanted to go, but we were so busy that we didn't spend enough time probably planning it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense, man. You're busy in the grind. That's something, it's been interesting from a podcast aspect. It grows slowly. And this is my third year now. I'm in my third year of doing Living Fully Loaded. And when I just look at numbers, I'm like, gosh, man, this seems like it's taking forever. Like, it's like, this is so slow. But then if you go back and you look at, like, let's look at the data. Let's break down the percentage of growth from year one to year two. And then you see something like, a crazy percentage. You're like, holy crap. And I've talked to other guys, and I know this is very specific to podcasting, but I've talked to other guys that have really done well in this industry, and they're like, man, it's really just consistency and hanging in there. And another thing, I made a note so I wouldn't forget here. One of the big things that all these guys that are doing awesome stuff is, man, they're just not afraid to try. That was one of the most frustrating things to me when I would ask these people, like, what did you want to be? Most of them never even tried. The people that ask me about starting a podcast, I bet you 99% of them never did anything else. And I wasn't like, don't do it. I was like, this is what you need to do. And nothing ever came from it. And so it's amazing how many never even try. They never even start. And I'll tell you, the quickest way to not succeeding is by not starting. It's just pretty simple.
Well, and you brought up an excellent point there of, like, when you look around at people that are doing great things, we don't see all the failures they've had along the way. We only see the end result. Yeah. And too many times, we're all guilty of it, I think, is at that first moment of rejection or failure, we're like, yep, everybody was right. That's why we shouldn't do that. Next, let's look at something else. Yeah. Or, like in your case, you said when you went back to farming, you took about a pay cut that was about half. Yeah. And I think too many people tell themselves, well, I can't do that. And, I think we get caught up in everything has to come down to dollars or pay, where to me, there's so much else that can be, like you said, your pay went down, but your happiness went up. How do you put a price tag on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's really interesting. People, you can make do. I mean, my gun budget was severely impacted. I will say there were several years where I was like, I'd look at the magazines of guns and be drooling because I just could not buy that gun. But now I can buy some guns, so you got to hang in there. But I mean, y'all see the sweet black mamba on the wall right here. So, it's you can get there, but man, it's people. I mean, all it really ultimately comes down to is it's an excuse. And I don't care if you tell me an excuse. If somebody, that's the thing, you can tell everybody. I mean, you could tell everybody 100 excuses. But at the end of the day, all that really matters is like, how is it's going to impact you. I've had this strange creative burning in my chest since I can remember. And that was why, even coming back to farming, I was not fulfilling that burning. And it's one of those weird desires where like I would bury it. I'd bury it. I've talked about it a lot before. I wanted to be in the film industry. I thought that would be really cool. And I still don't think that ship has sailed. I don't consider it done. I might be Clint Eastwood in 60 and making a movie one day. Who knows? But it's, you gotta be willing to go after it. And man, it's so amazing to me, the amount of people, they just bury it. And I would say probably eventually that flame probably burns out, which is really a bummer to me. Like, it makes me think of the amount of people that go to their grave with awesome potential and awesome, like, the maybe the medical things they could have brought to the world, maybe the scientific things, the art things they could have brought to the world, like all these like revolutionizing things that probably could have been brought forward. And also you see all these ads for like depression and all the different stuff. And I'm like, maybe if you were to unleash that inner fire a little bit, you would find yourself a lot happier. I mean, I have my irons in a lot of fires right now, but I am very happy. And I get that sense of fulfillment with that. And I think that's what people are missing, man. And it's a weird fear. A lot of people are afraid, whether they'll admit it or not. A lot of people are afraid that others are going to look at them and be like, this guy, I told you when I started my podcast, there's some people that were like, well, this guy just thinks he knows everything and he can have a podcast. And it's like, no, actually, that's why I bring guests on that know way more than me to talk to.
Well, and like you said, I think it's the fear of looking bad that keeps us from doing so many things that we want to do. And the other thing that I found is every time you succumb to one of those fears and don't try something, it almost builds up like more anxiety to the next one.
Yeah.
It almost, or let me back up. It almost becomes easier to give into your fear and not try that next one because you get comfortable just having ideas and, well, never mind. I'll justify reasons why I can't do that or can't do this.
Yeah.
And, along those lines, I wanted to talk, you mentioned earlier that we lost John Bartolo, who is a good friend of both of ours. And what I was thought of the, first time I talked to you about it or text you back and forth about it was you had a chance to go out there. And I know we talked, you had said, well, maybe I'll go later, because I know you had a friend that you were going to go with and he couldn't go. And ultimately you made that decision to go out there and you were on his podcast. You got to meet him, hung out with him, do that stuff. But I think too often that's something that we all miss is we always think there'll be tomorrow or next month or next year. And without going too deep into it, how does that affect you, like going forward that, okay, I took this opportunity to do it. If I would have waited, it wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, man, that's huge. I had thought a lot on that just because, at the time, and John was really, he was like, man, it's no big deal. We can bump back. SHOT Show was going to be in January and he was like, I'll be swamped around then. And so, after SHOT, we can try to line something up. And that's what I was like, man, there's a real possibility that I would have never met John and done all this. And I mean, look, it would have been really easy for me to not go. It was really funny. You called me when I was sitting in the airport. And I was like, man, you're a godsend, because I said, I'm like ready to run. Like, I was like sitting in there, like, I've got to get the hell out of here. Like, when I was sitting in the airport. And so, man, I guess if anything, it puts it into perspective that you don't know, we really don't know, when our time is going to come. And from two ends, one is, all right, if I have this opportunity, I don't need to waste it. And then on the second one, if I were to die today, would I feel like I have accomplished what I was capable of? Everybody envisions this great moment of, you make it to your deathbed and you're laying there and you get to be like, man, what have I accomplished in this life? And, wondering like, what if this and what if that? And I most of us probably won't get that. It could be sudden. I mean, I had no idea that something like that would happen to John like it did. And John was crushing it. I mean, crushing the hell out of it. And I feel like I've talked to some other people about it. He was crushing it because John probably knew he was on borrowed time, after having some conversations. And, some people would have been like, okay, well, then if I'm on limited time, I'm going to shield myself into this, I'm just going to cocoon myself in. And John was like, I have limited time, so I'm going to get the most of it that I can. And I think that's a very valuable thing. I mean, it has definitely made me put into perspective, like, if the opportunity's there and you can make it work, then freaking do it. And it's going to be worth it. I mean, look, like, I'm not a Vegas guy. I learned that after going. Vegas is not particularly for me.
I probably could have guessed that before you went to Vegas, but anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. It's not quite my cup of tea. Now I've been to New York City. I don't know. Would prefer Vegas over New York City, but I don't know. If either one, I picked Tennessee over anyways. But but the opportunity of getting to meet John and do that was awesome. And again, man, I think about that. Like, if I had not gone, and then since then, John and I, we have phone calls, and he's had given me a lot of advice. And it's just like, all that stuff I would have missed out on if I would have let my fears overtake me. And on a second note with that as well, my wife she was really like, you need to do this. You need to do this. And so I do urge people, man, pick a good spouse, because my wife she doesn't want me to travel as much as I don't want to travel. But she also was like, this is a really great opportunity. You're getting to go to Vegas and be on this guy's podcast. And she was like, you can't waste this opportunity. And so she urged me to do it. And I'm insanely grateful for that, because I'll be honest, if she would have been like, why don't you reschedule? I would have rescheduled. I would have been like, all right, let's do it. Let's reschedule. And so she really pushed me to do it. So a good spouse is a cornerstone. A lot of people want to be like, they think once they're married, that their dreams are done. Like, they have a family now. All right, I can't pursue my dreams anymore. Can I now all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm going to sell everything and I'm moving to California and I'm going to try to become a movie star? No, that would not be a good idea for me to do that. My wife would smother me in my sleep or something. But but you still, man, it doesn't mean your dreams die. You be strategic at that point. You have to be strategic in doing it. And you have a crew. Like, when I got done with this podcast, I couldn't wait to call my wife and tell her about how awesome the podcast was. So it's like you've got a cool celebratory crew with you. Not to get off on a weird, like, marital tangent there, but I think it's really invaluable to have.
You gotta have somebody that'll celebrate your wins with you, in my opinion.
Yep.
Otherwise, we've seen it a lot with different people that, celebrities, where it looks like by all accounts they're winning. And then we find out that they were the loneliest people. They had nobody to go to, nobody to celebrate those wins with. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, how popular you are, how big your celebrity becomes. If you don't have people to share it with, I think it's all lost.
Yeah, I agree.
And the one lesson I was thinking of as you were talking about your, going out to see John and be on his podcast, so many times I think people will, like, let's say you would not have gone, but you're still constantly, thinking, how can I grow the podcast? How can I do this? But then when an opportunity comes up, we're so quick to justify why we can't do it. And then we'll go right back to saying, oh, I really wish I could grow this, or I really wish I could do this. Yeah. And we just passed over a perfect opportunity to do exactly what we want to do because we gave ourselves an excuse or an out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like you said, man. I mean, I think if you get to making excuses, it's real easy to just keep them rolling.
And it's really easy from what I found. I've been very guilty of this, of living right into those excuses. We tell ourselves that story, and then we'll do everything in our power to make that excuse true. So that way we can justify to ourselves, see, I was right.
Yeah. I think, and that is one of the curses to farming, because there is always something that you can do. Like, there's equipment right now that I've got leaky cylinders on my track hoe. I could easily dedicate a few days right now to changing those cylinders out. It would be a terrible job, which is why I have not done it yet, but I could do that. And so, yeah, it'd be real easy if I had some opportunity come up and I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I tell them, like, man, sorry, I got to work on the track hoe. Then I could make that happen. And so, yes, I think
in many ways you're not wrong. You do have to do it.
Yeah.
But you've also been putting it off for I don't know how long, but it just becomes convenient to get you out of the hard, or getting out of your comfort zone.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's called the comfort zone for a reason, man. It's nobody enjoys getting out of the comfort zone because it's freaking comfortable. But now y'all are like getting all the farm sounds. Like, y'all can probably hear the spray rig out there backing up right now. That's
at least they know it's authentic. They know that.
Yeah, we're here. Like, I'm in my shop. I don't have like great soundproofing in here. It's pretty quiet until you get a chicken squawking or the backup alarm over here on the sprayer. So I do apologize for the farm sounds.
That's no problem at all. So looking forward, where do you want to take your podcast to, like, over the next couple years?
Oh man. Well, whenever I dream, I never dream small. So I want to shoot for the stars with it. Not from a financial standpoint. That obviously would be great to draw in some extra income. But honestly, I want the podcast to get to a level where I can have anyone that I want on the show. Like, that was my goal from day one. Whenever I swapped to Living Fully Loaded, I was like, you know what? If I want to have, I talked about Brad Pitt earlier. If I want to have Brad Pitt on my podcast, I want to be in a position where it has enough exposure and reach that I could contact Brad Pitt to be on my show. And I know that sounds wild. Somebody's like, this dude thinks he's going to talk to Brad Pitt, but that's the way my mind works, man. I'm not going to go into something and aim really low because I just don't see the fun in that. Like, I want to go really big.
I had somebody tell me to dream so big that everybody else's dream around you can fit inside of that.
I like that.
So make your vision so big that it's, like you said, it's crazy or obnoxious to people that, this guy thinks he's going to have Brad Pitt on, but make it so big that everybody else's that is around you, your family, your friends, dream can fit inside of that.
Yeah.
which I thought
Well,
was great advice.
That is. And I mean, I look at it now, even I have 2 kids, and I think about as a father now, like, what better way to show your kids, like, hey, dream big and get after it than if they see their dad dreaming big and getting after it. Like, I mean, I've said it before. I'm in a very small rural town, and dreams of like that caliber are pretty crazy. But then whenever I actually stop and think about it, Justin Timberlake's from 20 minutes down the road from here. So it's like, that dude's like a mega superstar, and he's from right down the road. And Isaac Hayes was like from out like near Memphis. So it's like, man, we got a couple guys with big reach, which I guess Isaac is rest his soul. But like, it's, I mean, man, the people that all achieve something, most of them were not handed this, and their dreams probably sounded just as insane. I'm sure when Richard Soren decided he wanted to start Sorenex, people were like, this dude thinks he's going to get in here and, create this fitness revolution. Like, this guy is, he's full of himself. A lot of people, they almost get insulted because they think that when you dream big, they think it's like this egocentric thing. And that's really not it. Like, I don't think I'm a very ego-driven guy. Like, most of my goals in that, I mean, I have huge goals, but it's really so that I can connect with other people. Like, that's kind of my main aim, I guess.
And that's awesome. One question I always like to ask all of our guests is, I feel like everybody has a pivot point that has happened in their life at some point, which even at that time may have seemed like the worst possible thing that could have happened to you, or it could have been the best possible thing. But I know, like, for me and many others, you can always point back to like that one event that kind of put you on the course that you're on now. Can you pinpoint to anything or one event?
Oh yeah. I got a very specific day. Man, I was 18 or 19 at the time. I can't remember my age, but we were working on our farm office. This was my dad and them had gone really big into the row crop at this point, and they needed a good headquarters. We had this old building, and we called it the bird house because they used to raise quail in this house. And me and him were cleaning it out. And at this point, man, I've got an agent in Memphis. I'm in it full bore, man. I'm going into the film thing. Could not wait to get out of the farm. And we're moving a refrigerator out. Because funny, I can like visualize the whole scene. And I've got a great relationship with my dad. I like to preface that because this was not a pleasant experience on this day. We have a great relationship. We work together almost every day now. But anyway, so we're getting this refrigerator out of this place, and it's a real junky little place at the time. It's kind of like become storage, and we pull this fridge outside, and I've like decided I'm going to tell my dad that I'm quitting the farm. I'm going to give him like a month notice to try to find somebody. And we get the refrigerator out and set it down, and I'm nervous as hell. And I just said, Dad, this is my last month on the farm. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm going to leave the farm. I said, I need to do something else. And I'll help you all this month, and then I'm done. And he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to be an actor. And he was like, you are never going to be an actor. He said, you're never going to do that. And I said, well, I think I will. And he goes, it's never going to happen. And I just said, okay. And that one moment, like I've like, that moment is burned into my brain. And I will say that's part, actually I told you earlier, I don't know why I've always been kind of, when somebody tells me to go this way, I go that way. Thinking of that moment now, I've never really thought of that until now. That's probably largely why. Because there's like this innate desire to prove people wrong that's inside of me. And that, I would say, has been that's kind of what set me on the trajectory of, then I went to tech school, because at the time I needed to say this too, because when I quit, like my path was kind of planned out. I went to EMT school out of high school, and I was going to become a firefighter, and I was going to be a farmer. And I could never be a firefighter because I could not have my beard, and I love this beard. So that was that was not going to work. But so I finished the first semester and I quit. So I mean, like, it was a really big moment for me with my dad, because he had planned, you're going to be a farmer and you're going to be a firefighter. And so I left EMT school and I told him I was going to be an actor. So it was like a shit plate handed to him in his mind. And so it's having somebody like your dad. Like, I mean, all aspects of who I am as a man essentially come from my father. And so having them be like, you are never going to do this. Like, you know, you tell them your dream and they're like, no, that's stupid. Basically, that right there, I think I could have taken it two different ways. And one of the ways would have been like, okay, you're right. And I could have said, I'm not leaving, I'm staying. And instead I was like, well, you're wrong. And I'm going. And so I think that was a huge moment for me. Like, I would say that's probably been the tide turning in my life, even though it didn't immediately, like, the podcast didn't start right then. But it set me on the path to where I am today.
That's awesome. And it's, you know, I think so many times, and especially like our father's generations, you know, that's kind of the way they lived for a lot of them was, you know, especially I see it a lot around here, not as much anymore, but we have a family farm. You're going to come back and you're going to work in the, you know, family operation. It'll be passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah.
And so credit to you for, you know, proceeding and, you know, having the, you know, the fortitude to say, no, I am going to go try my own path. And as you tell that story, I can see that in you a lot, in a lot of the different things you do.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. So that's awesome.
Well, I'd add too in there. I think part of that, I watched my dad. He was in the parts and auto parts business. His dad had started Hanks Garage in auto parts, and had run that until he passed away. And then my dad took it over, and my dad hated it. Like, he loved the people, like he got to talk to people, and but he did not have a passion for running an auto parts store and garage. And he did that for 40 years of his life, pretty much. He was farming on the side, but doing this. And so, I mean, I knew he was doing a job that he pretty much hated every day for nearly 40 years of his life. And I knew after seeing that, I was like, I am not doing that. I'm just not going to do it. So it's funny because he probably felt like I was like, where is this? Like, I'm sure he was probably like, where in the world is he getting this crazy idea from to do something like this? Where in a lot of ways, it's from him that I was deciding to do this, because it's like, I've seen what you're doing. I don't want to be in that same boat.
That's an area that I'll always give my dad credit on. People will ask, you know, like, were you pressured into going into the gun business? And Dad told all of us, he would always say, you have to go do what you want to do. He's like, running a business is a lot of work. And if it's not something you enjoy, you will fail. And I think he probably learned that he worked a job that he hated and finally got to a breaking point. And that's when he decided to pursue his hobby and go full time into the firearms industry. You know, so I think he had it from a different perspective, that he had been pushed to that brink of, I can't do this anymore. I absolutely hate it.
Well, and that's why I say I think there's some value in the miserable jobs, because a lot of guys, some people, like we said, never start. You got to kind of give it that shotgun blast. I mean, one, you got to be a freaking responsible human being. Go get a job. Even if it's something people like want to wait forever for the perfect job. Go get a job, and you might be so miserable that then it pushes you into the right path. And I mean, you know, if I had gone and let's say I did go and landed somehow this DOD contract doing some machining stuff, and I was making, freaking building Gatling guns. I mean, that'd be badass. I'd love doing that. Like that'd be right up my alley. Like some Lord of War type stuff, man. I'm all for it. But but then look at my whole trajectory. Like I probably would have never. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't have been happy. I probably would have been happy. I don't think there's one path for one. I don't think every person has one single path that they can go down. So, I mean, I probably would have been happy and been making some cool stuff. And I mean, it might have been, I don't know, who knows, but probably would have never started this podcast. I would not have this awesome group of friends that I have. Me and you would probably not be talking right now. I wouldn't have you as an awesome friend. Well, I don't know. Maybe in the DOD world, we might could have crossed paths, but it's really interesting. If I had not had that job I hated so much, I probably would not be doing what I love doing right now.
And I think that's a perfect way to end this because that's such valuable advice. So first, I want to say thank you.
Don't stew in it. Don't sit in it, man. I got to add that. Because how many people do you know that work a job they hate for like 20, 30 years? And they're like, well, this has got great retirement and medical benefits. That is the dumbest shit ever made.
You see the other side of it is they feel like they're invested in that because they paid for a 4-year degree or whatever it might be. And they're like, well, I can't, I paid for this degree. I can't go do that now. I have to do this.
Yeah, that's bull crap.
Yeah, and I know it'd be very hard if you're, have, especially for what a 4-year college cost to just be, no. But at the same point, our happiness isn't worth giving that up.
It's not, man.
And the other thing that I always talk about, and I've had people talk to me about this, is, when a lot of times you make that decision to go to college, you're 18 years old. How do we know that's what, why are we forced to make a decision what we want to do the rest of our life at 18?
Yeah.
Why am I still doing, why is somebody still doing a job at 50 that they hate because they made that decision at 18? It's never too late to dive into something new. Especially in the world we're in right now, I think it's probably been easier than ever to transition.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can transition. I mean, and there's information, we've got information on everything. Like, I'm not a huge proponent of college at this point, but I do see, dude, you can learn a ton online. I mean, the opportunity for learning has never been greater, in my opinion. The information is there. You can learn it. And yeah, man, that's the big thing. Don't be afraid to take a job that you don't know if you'll like. Because I mean, I've had that job. I hate it. And
like you said, don't be afraid to recognize that and say, this isn't for me. I'm going to try something else. There's no shame in that. Yes. I don't think.
Yes. The bad part is whenever somebody does get in that job and then they turn around, they've been there for 20 years. And even if you have, you can still change, man. I know people that are 60 that have gone back to college and stuff. And it's man, I didn't want to go when I was 18, but hey, man, I give it to you for going when you're 60. Being able to take that jump. I mean, so just don't stew in the misery. Get out of it.
That is fantastic advice. So once again, I want to say thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're getting close to your busy season here, so I do appreciate it. Where can people both find you on, your social media? And I know you have 2 different podcasts. If you can rattle those off quick so everybody knows where to find you.
Yeah. Well, first, man, like I said, I greatly appreciate you having me on. It's always an honor chatting with you. And it's been as awesome as I expected it to be. So I appreciate you having me on. And man, Living Fully Loaded is my baby, I guess, the one that started and really pushing it. It's livingfullyloaded.com is the website for it. You can find it on there. It's on YouTube, all the podcast platforms. And then Talk Dirt to Me is kind of this little fun side project that me and my cousin have started doing. And it all is in the agriculture world. There's a ton of kind of like myths and bad ideas around farming and stuff, and we kind of unravel that. And Talk Dirt Podcast is the website for it. You can follow me at lo.hanks, just Low Hanks. I'm a pretty simple guy. People can probably figure out with my stuff. I don't have some elaborate names, but at Low Hanks is my Instagram, and that's where I'm probably the most active. But yeah, man, again, like I said, thank you so much for having me on. I'm proud to consider both of you great friends, and I really appreciate the time.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the friendship. And thank you guys for listening. And as always, if you have any questions, hit us up at podcast@volquartson.com. Thank you.